Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Smith, and I have great news. It turns out, let me make sure the sound is better. Here we go. It turns out that Monsanto lost their trial of the century. They were fined in punitive damages $250 million, found guilty for the fact that Dwayne Johnson, a groundskeeper at Basilia Unified School District in Bay Area, got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Let me tell you the whole story, but first of all, let us take a moment here and let me see some hearts here. Let me see some hearts. This is incredible news. Monsanto lost the trial, $250 million in punitive damages on top of the compensatory damages. I'll explain all the details in a minute, but let's have some hearts here. Let's have some fun. Let us really take a moment in and let me explain why this is so important. Oh my God, you may have seen my live Facebook interview with the mastermind attorney who did an incredible job on closing arguments, who's a real hero of mine, Brent Wisner. And so I'm sure he's rejoicing right now in the courtroom. So let me explain the background and what this means for the future. First of all, Lee Johnson, his name is Dwayne, they call him Lee Johnson, father of two, worked as a groundskeeper. And when he got elevated and promoted, it was his job to use Roundup. And they used a Monsanto generic version called Ranger Pro. Yes, they have a Roundup version and they have a Ranger Pro version that sells basically for different prices, and it's the same company. That's how they market. So he started spraying it every day. He would go through 150 gallons of Ranger Pro herbicide every morning for 3 hours. And he'd do that about every other day. And he would get the mist on his face. So his face and neck were covered in this glyphosate-based herbicide. Let's call it Roundup. And a few months later, he started to get a rash. And then he contacted Monsanto and said, is it possible that this rash comes from your thing? My doctors are saying it might be cancer, or that they think it could be cancer. And there we have the internal memo from Monsanto where someone asked questions in detail for 45 minutes and then sent a note to Dr. Goldstein, who's in charge of the toxicology branch. And Dr. Goldstein says, I don't know why he would be complaining about a rash. It's not normal, but I'll call him. And Dr. Goldstein never called him. So he continued to spray. Then Monsanto, the Roundup, the glyphosate, gets listed and declared as a probable human carcinogen by the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer. And that means that the #1 agency in the world said it's a carcinogen. And about 2 weeks later, after Lee Johnson now clearly has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, serious, he contacts Monsanto again. This time he actually calls the Poison Control Center, which is contracted by Monsanto, and said, I'm still using it. Is it possible that the spray is related to my cancer? He also talked about that at one point the hose breaks and he got drenched with Roundup, drenched with it. And instead of immediately stopping the hose, since he was working at a school district, he immediately created a moat to protect the Roundup from going down and hurting the children, and then was able to turn off the spray. But he was drenched in it, and he didn't end up having a chance to shower for several hours. He just wiped it off. And then another time he had a backpack and he didn't realize that it wasn't his sweat that had melted or had leaked onto his back. It was the backpack, and his back was filled with exposure to glyphosate and Roundup. So he was explaining this to Monsanto and explaining this to the Poison Control Center. And after they had heard clearly that Roundup is related to cancer, according to the World Health Organization, and here's Lee Johnson saying, I'm still spraying it. Is it possibly related? They never called him back. At the same time, they built a whole program to try to undermine the World Health Organization's determination. And so the Monsanto papers, the secret documents that were made public, and I'll tell you the story in a minute, how it was a brilliant move by Brent Wisner. It showed that they planned to orchestrate outcry, that they ghost wrote articles. They said, yeah, it worked years ago. We ghost wrote an article and it worked. And that was the article that the EPA referred to give Roundup or glyphosate a free pass. It was written by Monsanto. It was ghost written by Monsanto. And so they said, okay, we'll ghostwrite, we'll get our front groups like Sense About Science or the Biofortified or all these different front groups that we're very aware of, Academics Review. We'll let them try and go after the World Health Organization and declare that it was unscientific. So what the lawyers did was brilliant. They showed clearly that the determination that glyphosate causes cancer, and particularly non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, is scientifically supported, based on epidemiological evidence, based on toxicological animal feeding studies, and based on the mechanism that it causes oxidative stress and it causes genetic mutations, which can lead to cancer. And they showed how Monsanto was refused to bring anyone from their own staff to testify because they would obviously go into cross-examination and be ripped apart. And they didn't bring any scientists to argue certain key pieces to defend against Monsanto's as a carcinogen, glyphosate as a carcinogen. So they had a fairly weak position scientifically that they claimed was very strong. But our guy was so brilliant, he chopped it to pieces. And so what they told the jury, I was there when the judge read to the jury what they needed to do for deliberation and also the kind of damages. There's three types of damages. There's the economic compensatory damages, and that was agreed upon. They call it stipulated, meaning it was about $2.3 million of actual costs to Lee Johnson and his family for getting the disease. And he's not supposed to be living for the next 2 years. He's supposed to be having a terminal cancer right now, which is why they rushed this particular case to trial. And it's interesting, the judge was very, very particular on what she allowed in the trial. And she did not accept a whole bunch of other evidence that the lawyers wanted to present. And since the trial started, they have even more evidence. And so what's going to happen in the future is really significant. I'll tell you that in a minute. So the first is compensatory damages that are of economic value. The second, keep looking, by the way, over there for the compensatory damages. I have someone here. We just got this. It was announced, about 5 minutes before I started the live Facebook. The second is non-economic compensatory damages. Now, the plaintiffs asked for about $1 million a year from the time that he got the disease till the end of his life expectancy. So it was about $38 million or so, added to the $2 million, it's about $40 million what they were asking for. They also asked for $372 million in punitive damages. Well, what we found out is, I don't know what the compensatory damages are. They have been awarded, but they also awarded $250 million on punitive damages. Now, punitive means that there was malice. Most people don't know what malice is. I learned that at the court on Tuesday. Malice is not only like, I want to hurt you, but malice is also blatant disregard for the health of people. And so by not calling him back, he was continuing to spray after his body was covered in lesions. He was having trouble sleeping. He couldn't go out in the sun. He was dying. He had a death sentence, and he was still spraying because no one called him back. Instead, they just tried to cover themselves by lying about the science, and that was all brought out in the lawsuit. So it turns out the reason why we have millions of papers, I mentioned I was going to say this, we have millions of documents now in Monsanto, because what happened was during discovery, Monsanto had to turn over all those documents. They were made available electronically or hard copy to the plaintiff's attorneys. And then the plaintiff's attorneys, I don't know if they did something or waited for something. Monsanto had 30 days. I think they did something where they said they wanted to make it public. Monsanto had 30 days to respond to that request, and they didn't. For some reason, the high-priced attorneys that cost them a fortune, for some reason, never filed the blocking motion. And our attorneys, I call them our attorneys, our side, made them public. They didn't go and ask the judge, are you sure it's okay? They're aware of the law. They made them public, and millions of documents became public. And now we see the dark underbelly of Monsanto, how they lie, how they ghostwrite, and how even within their own memos, like Donna Farmer, who I debated on the doctors in 2015, who said, I can tell you that I'm confident in the safety of this product as a mother, and I can back it up as a scientist. Well, I read that she actually said in her private memos, we can't say that Roundup doesn't cause cancer because there isn't enough research on the whole formulation. She ghost wrote an article, took her name off, and reduced the link between Roundup and miscarriages. She was CC'd on emails where she conferred and confirmed that the rats that had tumors might be, or that died in a particular study, it might be treatment related, meaning related to the herbicide, and that the surfactant, which is mixed with the glyphosate so that it penetrates into the skin of the plant, can also penetrate into the skin of animals and humans, and that might have led to the tumors in the skin study of rats. And so she knew all of this stuff, and yet when she debated me, she was smiling and happy and pleasant and confident and lying. So I contacted the doctors and said, guess what? 2 years ago, the person that I debated on your show was lying. And here's the documents. And they said, okay, we're going to give you 3 or 4 minutes. And it turns out they gave us an entire hour because Brent Wisner was on the show, this brilliant attorney. One of the plaintiffs was on the show, and that leads to the next step. This is not the only trial. There is another trial that happens in St. Louis that starts very soon. There's another trial that's going to go in the federal court, and there's another trial that's going to go in the state court, all class actions. Right now, the total number of people that they're representing is about 4,000. And that's just now. Now that this verdict is in, anyone with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma who's been dealing with Roundup may be adding their name to the list. Now, let's just pretend for a moment that the $250 million in punitive damages gets bargained down. You know, I imagine, and I don't know this because I haven't spoken to the lawyer today, I'm sure he's a very popular person, that Monsanto is going to appeal, and the judge is going to say, find a settlement because Lee Johnson is dying, and you want to make sure he has money before he's dead. And so, and I met Lee Johnson, by the way, beautiful man. And they'll probably settle on something. I'm guessing. I don't know. This is a good guess so that they don't have to wait. Now, let's say they settle on 10%. Let's say 25 million. I hope it's not that low, but let's say they settle on 25 million. Now, if we just multiply, I've got my little computer here. Okay, so 25 million times 4,000 people equals 100 billion? Is that possible? Well, it's beyond the limits of this iPhone calculator. It's a large number. Do the math. What I'm saying is this. Bayer just completed its purchase of Monsanto. When they did, when they were just floating it to their shareholders, I wrote an article that was published in a financial website, I forget which one, but it was a prominent one, saying to the shareholders that it was a bad idea because Monsanto is filled with liabilities. And I mentioned the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I mentioned some other ones. In fact, I had 17 pages of backup notes about all the ways that they were liable, and that by taking them into Bayer, you know, throwing Monsanto a lifeline because everything is based on Roundup there in terms of the majority of their revenues, and Roundup is failing in the field, and it was named a carcinogen, so it's failing. So Monsanto was desperate to widen its chemicals, and Bayer was desperate because it was running out of pharmaceutical categories, and so it threw Monsanto a lifeline, and I said that, throwing them a lifeline, they're going to pull you down. So they spent about $62 billion for Monsanto. I'm guessing that they're probably wondering whether it was a good idea around now. So it'll be interesting to see what new evidence comes out, and I'll be studying it, and I'll be talking to the lawyers and sharing it with you. So make sure you like this page, and also go to the Institute for Responsible Technology, sign up for the newsletter for more in-depth regular coverage, and share this. Share this good news. We have been fighting with Monsanto. They are voted regularly each year as one of the top most evil companies in the world, most hated companies in the world. And when you look at the Monsanto papers, you realize why. They have been realizing that their products are dangerous, are carcinogenic, and they fight back and continue to sell their product. I can go into great detail how they have attacked scientists, how they have rigged research, how they have suppressed evidence. And if you listen to some of the other stuff that I've shared, how they have lapdogs in the EPA that work on their behalf, like Jess Rowland, who was a famous character in the trial just now, because they have black and white evidence where he was working on behalf of Monsanto when he was working for the EPA and was in charge of the EPA's committee that made the determination, guess what, that glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, is not carcinogenic. How about that? What a surprise. He also tried successfully to stop another agency in the United States government from doing an evaluation of glyphosate, and even told his handler at Monsanto, if I can kill it, I deserve a medal. So he was bragging about the fact that he was going to try and stop an evaluation on glyphosate as a carcinogen from another NIH-related organization or CDC-related organization, and if he did, he deserved a medal from Monsanto because he was doing their bidding. Oh my God, there's so much good information that came out. As you may know, Seralini, the most detailed research on GMOs and Roundup causing harm, and one of his big study got retracted. It turns out in the secret papers, Monsanto hired the editor of the paper and paid him tens of thousands of dollars for basically doing nothing, and then soon after, the paper was retracted. I mean, it was so blatant. And so many times, if you look at the actual articles that are written by the so-called independent people who did an independent evaluation showing that it is not a carcinogen, and they had no ties to Monsanto, and there was no indication of any conflict of interest, and then you look at the secret papers, and Monsanto worked with them, hired them, paid them, wrote the stuff. They worked with Monsanto the whole time. They were brought in by Monsanto and never divulged or disclosed that information. So yes, I am very happy today for this incredible verdict. $250 million in punitive damages ain't bad. Did we get a compensatory amount yet?
The total amount was 289.2.
289.2. So 250 million and then 49 or 89, 39.2. Interesting. They 39,200,000 in compensatory damages. Brent, the plaintiff, asked for the 2.3 million in economic, but about a total, if you add that to his $1 million a year for his estimated lifespan, it was about 40 million. So I think they went with Brent's idea and gave him $1 million a year from the time he got sick to the time his lifespan, which was another 33 years or something. But evidently his doctors don't think he's going to live that long. So good on you, Brent. Thank you, Brent. I'm going to thank you from here. And please, everyone, share this information. It's time to celebrate that the courts, which have oftentimes been a disaster on our behalf, with, in some cases, there was a class action that was denied by an attorney, and the attorney was outed by the New York Times as having been a Monsanto lawyer of record previously, and never mentioned that, never recused himself. And yet he was ruling on behalf of Monsanto, denying the ability for a class action to go forward. Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion in the Supreme Court that favored Monsanto. He used to be a Monsanto attorney. So the courts are not necessarily a balanced, independent vehicle, but in this case, the jury did the right thing. So thank you to all the jury. Thank you to the attorneys. And it's a great day to celebrate. Safe eating, everyone.